Hi there, this is my immediate reaction video for House of the Dragon Season 1 Episode 9, The Green Council. Gonna cover this by going through the top 7 most notable points about the episode, because 7 is a good number. Starting with point 1, Alicent mishearing the prophecy was a red herring, it was a fake out. Thankfully, that's a good thing for us, that would have been a drastic change, and I've seen a lot of speculation videos the past week, a lot of people in the comments urging me discuss the ramifications of this, because I didn't at all in the last episode. And I tell them I didn't include it because I don't think they're going anywhere with it. That there weren't any leaks really implying this was a massive change, and it really didn't turn into anything. That in the books, the prophecy might be in the background, but it's never really mentioned as the driving factor behind the Dance of the Dragons. And for a minute we were afraid, oh, this is going to change, why years of political divisions were going to do this, of what, randomly on his deathbed, the king muttering, Aegon, unite the realm, because he's medicated and incoherent, would change everything. No, this is reality. And that realistically, no, the politics were already in motion. They do show that. I love the way that the direction and pacing on that it's framed as if, pushing in on her, and it's this quiet room, you can hear a pin drop, as if it's this big revelation. With his dying breaths, he said that Aegon should be king, and then there's just this beat, and then matter-of-factly, Otto and Tyland unceremoniously go, oh, good, that'll be a nice rubber stamp on the coup plans we've already had in place for years. And then they really quickly rattle off very detailed plans of, all right, we're going to arrest these members, the captains of the City Watch who aren't loyal to us. We need to contact certain allies. They've already earmarked the royal treasury for how they're going to divide it up. They do that in the books. They divide it into forts and send it to their own castles to hoard it. And it's so much more impactful visually than in the book that, like, Beesbury is sitting there. Actually, they talk about how they're going to divide up the treasury after he dies in the book version, that in front of him, as if he's not there, Tyland just casually going, he's not the treasury, he's the master of ships. Oh yeah, we've already earmarked the treasury of how we're going to do everything. And, sometimes you need to hit the casual viewers over the head with information, that they do have the trope of Alicent going, let me get this straight, you were always planning this. Given the option of having some people doubt maybe the prophecy, for a week or so here, we've been worried about that. Just no one's going to ask. Maybe they're motivated by the prophecy. They made it abundantly clear they were always going to do this. And at least we won't deal with people in the comments section bringing that up again for a long time. But that's not really what the change of point 1 was. The change is to Alicent. It's actually two things. First, and they made this clear in the interviews, she genuinely believes that Viserys wanted him to be king, so she feels morally blameless in pushing for it. That she knows it isn't, and even Book Alicent, it's gray that, well, she knows it's for the good of the realm, Viserys didn't know it was best for himself. It's not like that. And thankfully they have, even Otto doesn't believe it. Aegon himself doesn't believe this point. He barely interacted with me in the past 20 years, and you're saying on his deathbed he asked me to be king? No. So it's just an Alicent thing. It doesn't affect the Greens as a whole. But on a private level, that Alicent is genuinely convinced you wanted him to be king, that's having your cake and eating it too. Similarly, that Alicent knew about the coup in the books because they knew Viserys was inevitably going to die. I don't think they poisoned him. They didn't need to poison him. Think about it. They were already functionally in charge while he was incapacitated. If anything, they want to keep that going on. It's that old Simpsons joke of, well, sir, I'm well aware of Abe Simpson's poor medical health. Why do we need to assassinate him? Can't we just wait and let nature assassinate him for us? So, but they knew that we have to have a plan in place of what to do when one day we find Viserys is dead. And Alicent is in on it, but there's still debate within the Greens if Alicent is pushing for a bloodless coup. That we will win through diplomacy. And again, pragmatism, sometimes morality is pragmatic, that if we just run around killing people, it'll make us a lot of enemies. No, we'll seize power, we'll seize the treasury, we'll show Rhaenyra that we've got all the great houses rallied to our side, and offer her generous peace terms that you get to keep Dragonstone as your private fief, your sons, Jace and Luke, will even get to rule Driftmark, and all will be well. Which is really what happened 30 years before with the Great Council with Rhaenys and Viserys. There wasn't a war. She was outmaneuvered 20-1 by the other lords of the other houses. So that's what they're trying to do. And that doesn't make Alicent a villain. She's not complicit. It's just, look, we'll politically outmaneuver them. Nothing bad will happen. They didn't need to make her completely ignorant of it. And there's elements of that there, but they make it much more overt that she is the one pushing Otto. No, we will not send assassins. Send a political delegation. So they put a different twist. I think it's they wanted to show Alicent being more heroic or more agency and take charge in this. That Otto was kind of on her side too. He's a good diplomat. He knows that this is efficient. That it's Aegon and Kristen was the real one pushing for a lot of that, but and Larry Strong, but they wanted it both ways, and this feels like green propaganda. It feels like they've whitewashed Alicent in some ways. Maybe they're setting it up for something later, but right now in this episode, it goes against the Alicent we saw in episodes 5 and 6, who had become convinced simply by living and breathing Aegon is a threat, and whether I like it or not, a civil war will break out upon Viserys' death the day he dies. And maybe she was convinced by the dinner with Rhaenyra that it might not come to that. She still, even if she was convinced of that, for at least 6 years she's had plans in place of what to do. She might not be willing to pull the trigger anymore, but we have to at least seize power to negotiate with Rhaenyra from a position of strength. So this is green propaganda. We don't need that. And the only conclusion I can draw is that there must be Greens on the House of the Dragon writing staff and among the director's staff. So leading into season 2, we need to clear out the writer's room and directors. We need to examine and just kick out any pro-Greens that are in there. Well, starting with the writers and directors, but then moving down through the line producers and eventually, even the makeup artists and costumers. We can't have Greens behind the camera. And I have said this before, but let me make it clear. Anyone who says in the comments, I am not team green, I'm not team black, I'm neutral, that just means you are a well-disciplined green who isn't going to stupidly shout out, I am a green. Anyone in the comments who says, I am pro-green, is an undisciplined green. Those who say they're neutral is merely a disciplined green. So unless there's full-throated support for Rhaenyra, I know where you stand in the comments, and you have no place here anymore. Have I not made this clear? That this is Team Rhaenyra. I will not suffer traitors to Rhaenyra. We are Rhaenyra's army. You knew what you were getting into here when you signed up. I have been preparing for this since 2017, when I realized that, okay, this show is failing for Game of Thrones. There's no way Season 8 will be good. We have to prepare for the next prequel. It's probably going to be Dance of the Dragons. We have to show the world how amazing Rhaenyra is and how evil Alicent is. And we will not. We have to lay the groundwork for a world that is inimical to Greens, to pave the way for the rise of Rhaenyra. People can't tell when I'm being sarcastic. That frightens me. But anyway, moving on from point 1, the green propaganda. Point 2, unreliable narrator. There were a couple of unreliable narrator moments. There's actually 2 big ones. First one's Beesbury's death, that in the books, it's Orwell trying to cover himself, says, they took him to the dungeons and he died of a cold. He's trying to cover that he didn't try to save him. Mushroom says Kristen threw him through a window, which is probably also not accurate because they were trying to keep it a secret. You don't throw people through windows if you're trying to have a secret coup. Most likely is what Eustace says happened, which is Kristen snuck up behind him and slit his throat. They play with that a little in this, that it was more of an accident, that he slammed him back into maybe he was just trying to intimidate him by slamming his head back into the table, but he's a frail old man. He did it too hard and he caught him on the edge of the stone thing there. So he just hit him at just the right angle in the temple and it killed him. But I like that they at least kept it. I I wasn't as big of a fan of that. It was a little slow the way they did it, though I guess that's a stunt safety thing with you. It's an old actor, so they can't use a stunt man because it needs to be in his face. So whatever, but at least they kept the detail from the books. I love that they keep casually having the meeting while his corpse is there and blood is pooling across the table. That has been a mental image in my head since I first read The Princess and the Queen in 2013, that only they slit his throat and he was there. Even though it doesn't explicitly say, they didn't even bother to clear him off the table. And, it does make sense. We can't, like, move his corpse out of the room. People will see it. This has to be a secret. But why didn't you just shove him onto the floor or something, that his body is still on the table and pooling blood over everything? I'm happy that is an image I had of how they did that, showing how ruthless they are. And I love credit to the Beesbury actor. He did a lot with this role. That he's like this Abe Simpson type. Yeah, I might. You think, oh, he's this doddering old fool, but what? You think I'd trade my honor for a few more years of dotage and a few more years of life? No, you think my honor's so cheap a thing? I remember my vows to Rhaenyra and her father before her, so if you're going to kill me, go ahead and kill me. And then they do. But the last stand of Beesbury, that was great. I'm looking forward to that. But the big unreliable narrator thing is what happens with Aegon II. That there's different sources about where was he when Viserys died. Rhaenyra's source actually doesn't say anything. The pro-Aegon source says that, well, he was with his mistress, but no, he was a long-term mistress, a paramour, a daughter of a merchant who was well cared for, he's a long-term girlfriend. And Mushroom says he was in a really dirty, low-end brothel in Flea Bottom, watching, instead of dog fights, child fights between feral children. And they basically went with Mushroom's version. Now, for a while, there's this whole thing of, did Aegon want to be king or not? I'm going to make a separate video about that. That anytime Septon Eustace says something, you're supposed to realize he's the pro-Aegon guy. This is probably green propaganda. Problem is, a lot of people base their knowledge of this on that 20-minute animated featurette that came out in Season 5, which was mistaken. It's this whole thing that Fire and Blood, the full version, didn't come out till 2018, and when they put out preview novellas of it, first one was The Princess and the Queen, 2013, to edit it down for size, they cut out the red flags, pointing out Munkin, the pro-Rhaenyra historian, said this is what happened, would be turned to just, this is what happened. Remove the ambiguity. And there was this one big thing where it's supposed to say, Septon Eustace says Aegon didn't even want to be king, and said, what kind of brother would I be if I stole the throne from my sister? But Alicent convinced him, no, Rhaenyra will kill you, your whole family, and your children. And he reluctantly agreed. And it says no other source says that, so maybe we'll just have to take Septon Eustace at his word, or maybe not. That they took out the parts that this is what Eustace's version said. So because they didn't include those warnings that this might not be objectively true, unreliable narrator, the cartoon motion comic presented it as fact. Aegon didn't want to be king, and a lot of people have latched onto that. That is this mature, but who would I be if I turned on my own sister type thing. It wasn't that. But what they did do, I ultimately realized they went with Mushroom's version of that as well. At first, I didn't think Mushroom had a version, you see, that Eustace's version is he in dignified way, go, oh, I can't turn on my sister like that. Mushroom's version is no, he didn't want to be king, because he was such a drunken wreck and wastrel and lecherous guy that he didn't want anything. He was so indolent and just this wastrel that he was incoherent in a low-end brothel in Flea Bottom at the time. They had to drag him out. So you see, it's weird that I didn't even consider that a version of what Aegon wanted or not. What he wanted was to be incoherent, drunk in a brothel. So yeah, we're kind of looking at Mushroom's. I was worried they were presenting it as Eustace's built-up version of him. Mushroom has this much more. It's not even it was vilified. That Munkin vilifies him. Mushroom, he's almost pathetic. He's obviously they mention in the books he's handsy with the servant girls, and that he's fathered bastards in low-end brothels and just terrible stuff he's doing. but he's such a wreck and neglected by his parents that he comes off as pathetic to the point of almost sympathy. Not quite sympathy, just enough that you can see what turned him into that person, the parental neglect. And the fact that, not even neglect, that Allison has really been smothering him, and at the same time, like, he's the first time that a firstborn son has been passed over. And what would that do to his sense of self-worth? And he's just a wreck trying to look for validation anywhere. Viserys barely spent time with him because he was so focused on Rhaenyra, the heir, the only child he had with Emma. I like it. He's not a cartoon character. There's reasons he turned out to be the pathetic character, pathetic, twisted character he became. He's not Joffrey. He's a human who turned into this type of guy who would have bad things. As a psychological examination of what, behind every jocular frat boy is this guy who feels I'm unsuited to anything and has no sense of self-worth. So I actually like the way they did Aegon 2 in this, that they went with Mushroom's version. But they're trying to also, as opposed to here I am arguing how they made Aegon this, sexually assaulting, drunken, lecherous guy, and still have almost human aspects to him, that he's a very gray thing instead of straight evil. And in the same show, they're presenting Alicent as almost saintly good. In the books, she is not remotely this sympathetic, but she still does things, and I think they overcompensated. Not in a way that ruins the show, at least not yet, if they don't do this too much. That if they show her leaning into, okay, we're doing the war now, particularly after the blood and cheese incident, that assassination attempt. But right now, this is overcompensating. If they want to show people on both sides. They said that the 7 points, first one was changing Allison, thankfully not due to the prophecy, but just that she wasn't in on the coup more. Second thing, the unreliable narrator, they're really giving us Mushrooms Aegon, which is an interesting choice. Point 3, this is the last big one. The scene with the black loyalists. I really like this scene. This is straight from the books. And just the visual of, it's a trope, but it's a good trope of there's a coup and you have the soldiers and you round up all the captains, all the capos, and go, okay, new boss in charge. Kneel if you support me, stand if you don't, and then round up the ones who won't bend the knee. It's a trope. I love that trope. Him in front of the Iron Throne, all of that. The specific names they used for the lords in it are actually from the book version. They did pay attention to that. It says here that in the books, and they're mostly Crownlands houses and a few from the Stormlands, people who would have a reason to happen to be in King's Landing that day. So, like, not Northerners or Ironborn or something, people from around the Crownlands. In the books, it says the only ones who submitted were Lords Butterwell, Rosby, and Stokeworth. But there were 6 who did not bend the knee and were imprisoned. Lords Hayford, Hart, Buckler, Caswell, Lady Fell, and Merryweather. Lord Caswell, I talked about this last time, they actually turned him into a recurring character. And Lady Fell got speaking lines. The first guy in that scene, actually, he didn't announce what his name was, just said, maybe I should confer with my house first. He goes, no, decide now. I checked, the casting sheet actually does identify him. That is Lord Merryweather, also from the Northern Reach, right next to the Caswell. So, I like, really, with the Caswell in there, I like that they're setting up that the Northern Reach houses will not be amused at this. And that they killed Lord Caswell, like his bastard son leads an army against the Hightowers because of this. So I'm really happy they're setting it up. They did mention in that George R. R. Martin interview last week that he said Daeron, Allison's 4th child, Daeron, is in the show. He's just not in season 1. He's in Old Town. Other people pointed this out because I really don't pay attention to that title sequence thing. It changed to show 4 bloodlines coming out of the Viserys-Alicent union. So yes, Daeron is in the show. They indicate it in the title credits, and Daeron will be fighting Lord Caswell's son in season 2. That they're setting that up. Now, the interesting thing, though, a little change here, is they took them alive as political hostages. They do execute those 6 who refused to bend the knee, but they did it in retaliation for the blood and cheese assassination attempt. That'll happen. It's an assassination attempt. It'll happen later. They go, all right, we're not going to screw around anymore. Let's execute all the black political hostages. In the TV version, they only execute Lord Caswell, and apparently because he tried to escape. But the ones who didn't try to run, are they still alive, maybe, and we'll see them get executed in the aftermath of Blood and Cheese. That is a very real possibility, that they're not dead yet. So check if the casting sheets, if the actor for Merryweather, the actress for Lady Fell return in season 2. They haven't cut that he does that in retaliation for that. Another nice little point here. We got Lady Fell, House from the Stormlands, ruled by a woman. On Game of Thrones, they pervasively gender-swapped background female rulers into men without explanation. And I think the reason they did this is to make the badass female characters look more exceptional, which the whole point is they're not, that it isn't that unusual to see female rulers. Like, they wanted to build up Lyanna Mormont by tearing down other female rulers in the north, that Lady Janelle Kerwin was turned into Lord Kerwin, who had speaking lines. Why not just cast the woman like in the book? The Dornish delegation had a lot of women in it in the books, just little background things that you really wouldn't notice if you're just a casual viewer, but for book fans keeping track, it's just, why did you gender swap Lady Caswell? And it's so weird that as a book reader, I can't take myself out of my own experience of I know the source. People going by the TV show only would think that women rarely come to rule in Westeros, when in any given generation, there's about a dozen lordships in each of the 7 kingdoms. At least one of those is headed by a woman in any given generation. It isn't that unusual. It's like a 10th, but it's significant enough, in terms of their gender views. So I shouldn't be thanking people for doing what should be expected, but wow, Game of Thrones would have gender swapped Lady Fell, rather than introduce women can be rulers, and it's actually relatively commonplace. A similar thing, I've actually noticed this on someone mentioned, like the Joe Rogan podcast or something, mentioned, wow, they'll have to explain why there's black people in King's Landing. Where were they? They're like, in the books, like Chataya's brothel is owned by a Summer Islander woman who moved to King's Landing and opened up this fancy high-end brothel, that there's ships from the Summer Isles visit their ports on a daily basis, that it's not unusual to see Summer Islander merchants just on the streets of King's Landing walking around. The fact that they never showed that, because we'd have to explain why there's black people here, well, then you presented a world where they don't exist. It's like, well, if there's a lawyer show, the one main female lawyer has to be the one woman lawyer, otherwise she's not special. What? Then you're presenting a world where women aren't lawyers. So you see, I don't notice these things because I've read the book, but when you leave something out like that it's weird when I see TV-only audiences who are like genuinely surprised. There are women rulers? There's black people in the major ports from foreign lands? Because they chose not to put it in there. So the Lady Fell thing of, oh look, they didn't change that. Female writer and director pair on this episode, the 3rd of this season. Remember when Game of Thrones went the entire second half of the show without a female writer or director? We noted, and it's again the whole gender thing of like, the writer of Downton Abbey's a man, but he does a good job. It's when you are actively being criticized for how poorly you write women, it's embarrassing when you don't have a single one on your staff and don't do anything to change that. I realize point 3 here is broadening to include a couple of things. Other random thought, when Aemond and Kristen are going through the streets, they go, Aegon could be anywhere. He could have been kidnapped by mercenaries. He could be on a ship to Yeti by now. First time that Yeti has been mentioned by name in a live-action episode. They've mentioned it a few times in the Histories and Lore motion comics, but oh look, they're mentioning Yeti in live action, and this is yet another point where they're seeding a prequel spin. Remember how prominently they mentioned Nymeria repeatedly in the first episode, and there is a Nymeria prequel spin-off potential pilot in the works. Young Corlys's voyages, just from showing all this stuff, that there's a potential Valyria prequel, that there is an animated Yeti prequel project in the works. And they're seeding that. It's a one-off reference of, oh, Yeti, is a name we've mentioned in live action. This is what I would do. I would have them just work these things into casual conversation. Yi Ti is their fantasy version of Imperial China. So just mention that Yi Ti is there. I thought we'd have more scenes of Corlys saying, I've been to Yi Ti, I'm this famous explorer. I went there directly to cut out the middleman, and I came back with my cargo holds filled with spices and silks, became the richest man in Westeros. That would have been a better way to introduce that, as having Corlys, talking about one of his trophies that he took back from his voyages, but at least they mentioned it. I said I'm going on a tangent here. The other thing, the council scene should have been longer, but I think they just split it up into other scenes they're going to space out in the beginning of Season 2, talking about the politics of specifically which great house sides with them and which doesn't. That in this, look at my notes here, they mention the ones that are on the fence are the Tullys, Tyrells, and Baratheons. Actually, 4 were on the fence. The 4th was the Greyjoys. But they weren't even sure if Season 1 would be a success. I can see how they've left out all mention of Dalton Greyjoy so far. But Season 2, they'll just go, okay, we'll mention him now very prominently. That why bother introducing the Red Kraken for one line out of context briefly in this episode? That when they're already, rushed for time. I get that. And as for all the other great houses, they know the Starks and Arryns will support Rhaenyra, because when the Starks swear an oath, they mean it, even if their grandfather swore it. And House Arryn is headed by Rhaenyra's maternal first cousin, Jane Arryn, who is also, like Rhaenyra, in a position where she is a woman who inherited, and her younger male cousins are trying to usurp her. So they say, of course, she'll support them. The Lannisters, meanwhile, are on the green side. So that covers all the great houses. But I'm not too worried. I think they're moving at the beginning of Season 2. Other thing with the Small Council, Larry Strong is already Master of Whisperers at this point in the books, and on the Small Council. He's still just the Chief Torturer at this point. I think they must be holding off on his promotion until beginning of Season 2. Similarly, we already knew this, Harold Westerling, in the books, he dies around the time Melos dies. In the TV version, they've kind of merged him with another Kingsguard character, Stefan Darklin, and he's kind of taking on the Stefan Darklin role, which is fine. You condense characters. He's a great actor. Just keep it like that. So his stuff at the Small Council was invented, but I don't have a problem with it. It works. We're merging characters. So this covers the first 3 big points. Alicent, unreliable narrator. Mostly the Black Loyalists scene, touching on all the other stuff. Point 4 out of 7. Mysaria isn't very interesting to me. I'm just not... It isn't actively detracting from the season. Let me make that clear. And it isn't introducing plot holes or contradictions or anything. Anything that would be problematic. It's just not very interesting, and it's not that much material. I think the real problem is they hyped her as one of the lead cast members, the core A-level cast, to the point she got character posters that other people didn't. I think it's kind of... I've seen the suspicion mentioned by others that it was to try to market the show better in the Asian market. That, oh, look, we have an Asian cast member, which is pandering, but I'm not opposed to giving her more to do to make it play better in the Asian market. If you're going to hawk it to the Asian market, have it be a really developed character, not, lying by overhyping her, and she's not really that big of a character. I would have given her more to do to justify, because Sonoya Mizuno is a good actor. I've seen her in other things. And the biggest problem is her accent. That was just a disaster. That they said, we'll have her be a generic, mysterious foreign woman with a sultry foreign accent, which sounds vaguely French. And it's gotten so incoherent, I had to turn the subtitles on when she was talking to Otto to catch every word she said. Did you? Because I was actually trying to pay attention to her words. And I've seen news sites like Winter is Coming Down to outright say, drop the accent without explanation in Season 2. No one will care. It's that bad. Just stop. That it's harming the character. That on paper, this had the potential to be good. Have the stereotype of rising up from nothing to becoming the power broker of the Undercity. Like in Falcon and Winter Soldier, be the power broker, the shadow broker. They didn't really show it that much. The one time they did in episode 4 was actually pretty interesting. I will say, like, oh, I was never interested in Mysaria. I was in episode 4. When they play the ambiguity of, is she playing Otto, or is she on Daemon's side, or Otto's side, or is she playing both of them? Is unclear. And her delivery, you can see the actress is actually working with that in her conversation with Daemon of, is she on his side or not, or is she on Otto's or her own? That was good. We needed more of that, and we didn't get nearly enough. And I like that they have her, trying to be the power broker, trying to cut down on child trafficking and flea bottom in the slums. I saw one review site say, oh, they made up the fighting pits with feral children. No, that's Mushroom says that happens in the books. I think I would chalk up Mysaria to what Martin said. We needed another 3 episodes. Like as the top of the list is show young Rhaenyra falling in love with Harwin. Well, Harwin's on the City Watch. Another thing would be have Harwin interacting with, experiencing the rise of Mysaria as a gang leader to the gang leader to the power broker of all of Flea Bottom. Interacting just as a B plot, not the A plot, but just work in more that Mysaria is taking over as this major underworld figure there. That needed more development if they were going to use it. It wasn't an abandoned storyline. They do follow up on Mysaria in this episode, and it's really just setting her up for season 2. She does stuff in season 2 that we know from the books with the assassination attempts, but it's not that bad. It's just you're underusing this actress. The accent is... Find someone who defends the accent. I can't. Sometimes when showrunners do things where you can at best find an excuse or explanation, but not full-throated support, when on set they thought people would be praising this. For other things, I'm going to get into that, they were genuinely surprised that it wasn't just divisive. The whole thing, this was season 8 was very divisive. That would imply there were people who really liked it in large numbers. But getting in the weeds, point 4 is Mysaria should have had more development if they were going to hype her this much. I think that was a marketing gimmick. The thing is, there's that thing called the Ensemble Dark Horse, where there's like a recurring character we think is really fun and they gradually start using more. It should have been like that, where we look forward to her as this interesting, intriguing guest star. Instead, they framed her as an underused Tier A cast member instead of an intriguing Tier C cast member, guest star. They're all over the place with that, so I don't know what's going there. That is, again, there's worse things in season 1, and season 1's generally good, but if I was going down a list of things I would fix, I'd rather do the Alicent stuff. The Alicent stuff was a major change versus the Mysaria stuff just didn't land as well because they didn't develop her enough. The Alicent stuff, if I had to pick one, I'd do something to the Alicent stuff, not this. It's not introducing crazy plot holes or anything. It's not that interesting. And on paper, it should have been. Point 5 here, director Claire Kilner. I really like her work on this, and I know when people go, oh, I liked episode 5, therefore I like Claire Kilner, or if you didn't like this episode story-wise, therefore I hate Claire Kilner. She is a director, not a writer. I'm talking about, and I'm going to make videos on this, specific camera work I liked in episodes 4 and 5 that I was very impressed by. Geeta Patel was also really good in episode 8, but she said, I'm pretty sure she's not coming back next season. She just had a baby. She said in the podcast, the official podcast, that she wants to go back to doing documentary films. Sapochnik also said he's not coming back next season. So there were 4 directors this season. The other 2 were Claire Kilner and Greg Gaetanis. Over Instagram earlier today, I just messaged Claire Kilner, and she wrote me back directly that yes, I will be in season 2. It's not that big, she's commented on a few of my things before. Everyone's on Instagram from this cast. They really like it. Just the public thing, if I pointed out, I just listened to she just did the official podcast for this episode, and at the very end she says, I can't wait to see the scripts for season 2, and I just wrote in, were you indirectly admitting that you're coming back for season 2? And she said, yes, I am. Okay, you got me. I'm officially coming back for season 2. We know that Alan Taylor will be coming back from Game of Thrones instead of Sapochnik. Patel is not, I'm pretty sure, not coming back. I don't know what Yatanis is doing. But Kilner is on season 2, and oh look, it confirms that we'll have at least one female director behind the camera in season 2, which again, Game of Thrones didn't, and after 2 effing years, allegedly liberal news sites just stopped calling attention to by season 7. And the hypocrisy of that there are no women writers or directors on the show, and going into season 7, going into season 8, they kept saying this is going to be the greatest show ever. And I've talked about this before, the news sites that forgot their own principles, and I'd actually respect someone more who said it doesn't matter whether there's that behind the camera. It's these sites that were attacking other shows for not having female writers and directors kept their mouths shut about late Game of Thrones. And it reeks of hypocrisy to me that you abandon your own principles. The hypocrisy more than in what they actually did. But okay, we're going to have Claire Kilner back. She seems very nice. She's done a lot of work for this show. And not just the specific camera work, everything's from a specific perspective. They talk about this in the behind-the-scenes thing for this episode. If you think about it, Claire Kilner has done more this season than any other director, showing the streets of King's Landing outside of the castle. Think about it. Episode 4 and this episode is when we really saw a lot of Flea Bottom, physically. We saw a bit of it in the first episode, which was a night raid and mostly just people being rounded up in a courtyard and attacked. And it was at night, you don't need to do set dressing a lot. They explain in the behind the scenes for this, the streets of King's Landing are Caceres, Spain now. They're mostly preserved historical buildings. So they can't, knock down a wall if they need to. They have to work around that they can't damage any of the historic buildings in these historic streets. So there's this whole 5-minute thing behind the scenes for this episode where they talk about how difficult it was planning out camera shots, that you have to use set dressing that doesn't damage anything, pots, carpets. Then you have to, it's fascinating when you have costumes have to have breakers. People that make the wood and costumes and just everything you see in a street has to look weathered like it's been there for 30 years in a dingy back alley. That doesn't just come fresh off the shelf. Someone had to build that from scratch. So in terms of, it's mostly her set dressing team too, but in terms of how Kilner worked out, this is how we're going to turn the streets of Caceres into the streets of Flea Bottom. She did more work on that than anyone else. So much of the rest of this was the big interior set for the Red Keep. And there was also stuff for the Dragon Pit is the virtual set. The Grand Sept is also a virtual set. Check out those behind-the-scenes videos if you don't. The ones they put out weekly, they're really good. They give a lot of info. But those are all virtual sets. In terms of the streets of the commoners of King's Landing, she has done more than anyone to really develop that. I really like. I liked her work in episode 4 more, but that's just due to the nature of it was a street fair. There was more to do. So Kilner is coming back, and I, again, liked her work in all of this, and that she said it's more than just the castle. And rounding this out, because I don't want to go a full hour, point 6 and 7. Point 6, I have a lot to say about Helena, and I'm going to split that off into a separate video, because it's very important. What I will say, after giving that emphasis, is minor point, oh look, they introduced Helena's twins, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera. That they mentioned the children last episode and they updated the family tree. I was worried they wouldn't cast them until next season. Because we often don't hear about child actors, but they cast them in the flesh. We see the next Targaryen generation, there's Jaehaerys and Jaehaera there. So that was nice to see, and I have a lot of thoughts on Helena, which I will be developing and giving the attention it is due, not rushing it into an episode recap. Which brings us to our 7th and final point, which I will also be making a separate video about. We heard rumors over a year ago about these invented storylines for Rhaenys. That she happened to still be in King's Landing and has a face-to-face confrontation with Alicent while she's imprisoned, who tries to sway her to her side, but then she sneaks out with one of the King's Guard and escapes on her dragon from the Dragon Pit. That was the general outline from what leaks told us long in advance. All of that sounded brilliant. Giving Rhaenys more to do. We would have begged them to do that, pleaded with them, give Rhaenys more to do. What the leaks did not specify was that Rhaenys would linger around on her dragon in the arena and have a clear opportunity to kill the Green leadership, but choose not to. That from the leaks, it sounded like Meleys burst out of the floorboards, or not even that, out of the side of the building or something, not near them, and immediately fly away to escape. Just straight rushing out of the building, not linger around, and very clearly, and they say in interviews, just have this long point where she's even like roaring at them in their face, the breath is on them, and choose not to kill them. That's kind of silly. And the darndest thing is they know this is a change, and they're proud of this, that when you hear them talking about this in interviews, that they think, no, well, it is intentional. This isn't like an oversight. They say, we wanted a moment where Rhaenys has a choice to kill all of them and chooses not to. And isn't that amazing? Because look how great Rhaenys is as this honorable character. I'm going to make a separate video to draw attention to this, but short version is I was really angry about it, and I still don't think it's a good idea. But in all fairness, and I'm thinking from like a Preston Jacobs point of view, because he yelled about this before, how is this different from Ned Stark sparing Cersei? That he has, if you were a Martian coming down from space 10 years ago, watching season 1, if this is a non-book reader watching season 1 10 years ago, I don't remember what the reviews were like then. Or what were they saying about that Ned finds out that Cersei, all of her children are really Jaime's bastards, and rather than immediately tell Robert, he first goes to Cersei herself and warns her, run, because Robert will kill you as soon as I tell him. And it's this folly of mercy that he has. Well, I'm a good guy, I don't kill children. And it works because the books and story have established long in advance that he is horrified that Tywin killed the Targaryen children, or went along with them being killed. And this is a very core part of his personality, that he won't do that. So Martin managed to set that up well enough, and the story is told from his perspective that it's believable. Still, Ned can't bring himself to make the first strike. I kind of see that, okay, that kind of works. It's a Ned Stark moment, or at least I'm not. My point is, am I really one to go pointing fingers? I can see why, okay, on paper you wanted a Ned Stark moment where she chooses not to kill them. Also, now we can think of better explanations than they gave. That kinslaying is a major thing in their world. That kinslaying is a massive taboo, and that she would hesitate to kill them, when that branch of the family, when they haven't killed any of them yet. That yes, they've killed some lords and stuff, but kinslaying, you don't want to be the first one to do kinslaying. That is a major thing in their world, and I get that. I think it would have been a lot more effective if they had Helena and Aegon's children on the dais there. Imagine how much more sense this would have made, just on an instinctive visual level, if you saw Helena with her children standing next to them. That would have sold this scene a lot better, I feel. Then you have the problem, well, you have to work with small children, it's a crowd shot, they get distracted. Just sub them in, I don't know. But that would have worked a lot better. I think the problem is that, I wouldn't say they outright put their foot in their mouths, but they're not handling this well in interviews. That when they talk about this, rather than go, well, it's a Ned Stark thing, that kinslaying, and they do kind of say that, but they give this long thing about, we wanted to show that Rhaenys was the type of really good ruler who wouldn't just massacre people. Basically the Ned Stark thing. Another thing I think that they go into too much detail is, she respects Alicent as a mother, they said. And I get their point is really, she sees that Alicent, I would rephrase that as, she sees that Alicent isn't a monster, so she's hesitant to kill her. it's Caesar as a person. I get that too, that it isn't black and white, that the Greens are people, family. I mean, it's her first cousin's wife and mother of his children. Would have been more effective with Aegon's small children there, and that Helena is really innocent and all of that. They didn't explain it well in interviews. And what I was really upset about was, of course, the Hollywood Reporter interview with Hibbard, who, whenever they have to say, we want badass, is a word they overused on Game of Thrones. I think it's just how they talk, but Hibbard, not them, Hibbard going, well, I know you wanted a badass Rhaenys moment, but what about people saying it doesn't fit well? Well, that's just me with my triggering for that they could have, don't, if you're going to make a change like that, don't go because it was cool in an interview that we wanted a badass rainy scene. Say, I feel this serves her character better, not we did it to be cool. That it landed flat. So it's not even what they, on paper, I wouldn't have done this, but I can kind of see why you would. We wanted a Ned Stark moment for Rhaenys, but I felt it fell flat in the execution, and I've seen a lot of people yelling. I was yelling a lot until I went, Ned Stark. That surprisingly, like book fan sites like Westeros.org weren't as upset about that. But even so, or at least didn't single it out, but still, I'm not the only one pointing this out. That every review site, not book ones, mainstream ones, was yelling, Rhaenys not killing them was a big thing. It's not like we're going to shrug and overlook it. You wanted to draw attention to it. You wanted us to talk about it. And I haven't seen people praising, wow, how cool Rhaenys is. If that was their intent, the answer from every recapper, to greater or lesser degrees, maybe not angrily, but at least in confusion, has been, that didn't make a lot of sense. That was a little silly. What can salvage this? Or at least mitigate it? Is, well, next episode, when Rainey says what happened, you need to at least have in dialogue them say, well, why the hell didn't you kill them? And address that instead of just leaving it. That'll be the worst case scenario if they leave that unremarked on. Like if you have a line where they go, well, Rhaenys, why didn't you kill them? And she goes, I'm not a kinslayer. I will accept that. They gave a reason in universe, made it clear, well, blood hasn't been drawn yet between our families. So we'll see if they do that. If they have a line where, Rhaenys, why didn't you? Well, I'm not a kinslayer, and that would escalate things, and it would forever dishonor us. And and even from a point of practicality, the kingdoms would turn on us if we killed them all like that. Okay, but yeah, I'm gonna wait until next episode to do that, just to Rhaenys and thinking on that, because we haven't seen it play out yet. So I'm gonna postpone that, just Rhaenys and talking about this. Is when I talk about the there's only, like, you can count on one hand under 5 points I had criticisms about in this episode, in this season. Like, you needed to show Kristen how he got away with not with killing Joffrey Lonmouth. You show time skip stuff, lighting problems in episode 7. I can count on one hand the problems I had in this season, and this is one of them. Well, problems, I said one of the other things we'll be talking about is that Laenor secretly survived. That isn't even a problem as such, they just need to address it with Sea Smoke next season. This was, if I had a choice between Mysaria, Laenor Sea Smoke situation, and this is something I would change up just because it's so obvious. The other stuff is serviceable. This is below that. And again, there's like 5 things I have problems with. I'm rambling here, sorry. It's just, we will see how they address the fallout of that in dialogue next episode. And it ties back into that they want to show both sides as good and not ruthless. Well, not really, that they whitewashed Alicent. No, it's not whitewashing that Rhaenys is honorable, that she wouldn't draw first blood. It's a Ned Stark thing, I get that. So I'm not raving about it like I was right after I saw it, because okay. They're not handling it well in interviews, addressing that this wasn't. What did you expect us to do? Cheer this? I was on paper. I thought this is great. We're having Rhaenys have a subplot where she talks separate from that, where to have her face to face with Alicent, have her escape on her dragon. At no point did the leaks say she escapes and has a very clear, long, drawn out moment where she could easily kill them. That is where I draw the line. Even bursting out through the floorboards through civilians, well, she's escaping. It's the point that she stays around and could kill them but doesn't is the real problem. So I don't know. Let's see how they handle that next week. I'm not apologizing for it. I'm just saying I want to see the whole thing before I land on what we're going to do, because we have a full year after this without more recaps. I might as well wait another week to judge the whole thing. This is an obvious question for Rhaenys when she comes back on Dragonstone next week. So I'll make a longer video about that then. There's other stuff I want to get to first about the time jump and stuff. So please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments your thoughts on these big 7 points of whitewashing Alicent, unreliable narrator. They've gone with the mushroom version of Aegon II, setting up the black loyalists and stuff, where we're going with that. Mysaria not dragging it down, but not improving it either. Claire Kilner's a great director, and remember, I hate when people blame the director when they don't like writing decisions. Camera work wise, I really like Kilner. Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, Rhaenys, and everything. Please comment. I try to respond to every comment because I'm really interested in getting the discussion going. So please, I want to hear what you have to say.